with that, though, let's get to business here, because really what we want to do is cover quite a bit of content here today to go through and talk about really what the future is when we look at business systems. And I've got a lot of opinion on this to share with you, and some's good, some's bad. And really what we want to do is be really realistic of where we're at with this. So with that, let's go ahead and jump into my screen share here, just really high level. My name is Scott Frappier, like I mentioned before, Chief AI Architect, really a fancy title, meaning that I've been in the industry for a long time and I understand all the different types of business system requirements that customers have. And then I use the knowledge I have of the Microsoft platform, now focused around AI, to really address those needs. So once again, I actually cut my teeth, so to speak. It's a weird way to say it, but I grew up on the Navision product that became the Business Central product, and I competed against GP back in the day and grew to love the capabilities of that product and understand exactly why so many people use it. And today, what I want to do is I just want to compare and contrast why GP and why BC have a shift that's really occurring inside of the business system space. And that's where we're going to start this conversation, obviously, as we deep dive in for a little bit. So first and foremost, I want to talk a little bit about the mix of products that you have inside of your organization, because to say GP rules everything may be accurate in some organizations, but I'm sure you're using either third-party add-ins or even other software solutions that you have that you've built up that surround GP. And GP as a concept, as many of you, is an older type of technology that doesn't have all those capabilities just natively that now a modern business system has, like Business Central or even finance and operations, which means that it requires a lot of effort to potentially bring things together, to create reporting that is impactful, and to expand upon the needs that are being really tackled out by your customers of online capabilities, of service type commitments that are needed. There's all these different factors in our world that have changed that mean that business systems also have to keep up. So this requirement, when we think about it, is really about the new concept that we talk about when we AI enable a business. And we talk about this concept of what is called a frontier firm. And I want to just kind of demystify this a little bit, because when you look at how culturally Business Central or finance and operations or even Dynamics 365 sales or customer service or any of the Power Platform capabilities are on the Microsoft stack, we need to understand the direction that Microsoft is going so that you understand how to maximize your investment really with the capabilities. And what we talk about here is that a frontier firm is really what we classify as the beginning stages of a company that starts to use AI to augment a lot of the different types of conditions that they have inside of their business. Now, one of the things that you've probably learned as leaders, some of you are deeper in the AI journey than others, but I'll give you a really quick synopsis for the people that are just entering. AI does not solve everything. It's not like it's a nail and you're a hammer and everything is going to be a nail. There are different scenarios and different requirements in every business that drive then this adoption. We have companies, for example, that use basically AI and then just use the chat type capabilities with assistants, for example. We have AI where we've got humans that are managing multiple AI agents, like policy agents or HR agents that they then interact with. And we're starting to see what we call human-led and agent-operated type agents, which are much more prevalent inside of the business system space, like with Business Central, where basically agents are doing the work. And from there, you're the person approving that work, like a manager with an employee relationship, right? So this is something that's really prevalent right now inside of our space and has been a primary focus really around all of the different Microsoft applications. And really what we're starting to see here is this shift now as well. We've talked about this in the past with the Power Platform and low code, no code, where we've got a lot of technical expertise, for example, in the population that is more centered around pro dev. But one of the funny things about this is that all the knowledge inside of your organization is typically harnessed by the people that understand the processes, which means they're not going to be the ones that are going to do the coding. But at the same point, in order to build upon automation and to expand off of that, we really need to have our process experts control the process and the understanding of the data that goes in and the data that comes out to help make those particular decisions. So this is why AI is such a central theme then when we start looking at modern day business systems. Quite candidly, if I were in charge of an organization that was focused around purely technology as a CIO, for example, one of the factors, not the only factor, but one of the factors would be, does the business system support the ability for me to hook agents into it to automate these processes that we need to be able to keep up and be more efficient and really maximize the value then of that particular business system? Because this is what's happening. We're upgrading every process now inside of Business Central. We're empowering every expert and accelerating every developer. And what do I mean by that? Well, development as a concept shifts a little bit with AI, because instead of writing code, you can write a prompt. You can use natural language to describe what you want to accomplish to be able to get to the goal inside of your business. So once again, this takes a little bit of time and understanding. We have to understand what that reality is of the business system. We have to give more access to AI to democratize it. This is also a word that's been overused, but quite candidly, if you've never used a hammer before, you don't know how to use a hammer. You'll do it the same way I did when I was 6 years old and grabbed it at the very top because I had more control of it, but I didn't have any leverage to be able to drive a nail in, for example. And what we also have to understand is that AI is not an expert in everything, meaning I look at it as a 6 or 7 year old that I have to structure things around and iterate on in order to get to the goal that is needed. Now, the cool thing about this is that you're entering in a stage where you don't have all those beginning learnings. Instead, we are now getting into the stage where we have agents that can be used and are impactful inside a business. The components that you use beyond this as well go beyond Business Central. One of the big shifts that you're going to start to feel, and it is a feeling at first, is that it's not just one system anymore that's driving your business. You're not just installing GP to run everything. Instead, you have Business Central that has Power Automate, that when a production order is generated, that it sends it to an agent to then do some type of work inside of our system, for example. So we're not only just using Copilot, we're using Copilot, we're using Business Central, and then we're using agents that are either contained inside of Business Central to drive that, or are external using Copilot Studio as well, because maybe it has to do more as part of that particular process. So this is just something to note, is that the feeling here of having different systems is the reality in terms of what we look at as services architecture. And the benefit, though, is that you can choose what components you still want to drive while still then having those great capabilities then inside of your business platform to keep up with all those transactions that you're doing, similar to GP as well. And as Rob had mentioned in here, it is definitely not always hammer time for sure. That's definitely a reference there. So, all right, let's get into the Copilot apps and agents here, and let's talk a little bit more about this. So one of the foundational shifts that we're going to start seeing inside of business systems, and Business Central is one of those leaders, is the concept that AI is the new UI. Very first time I heard this, I thought that this didn't make any sense. I heard another analogy as well. AI is like electricity. And I'm just like, that is not, maybe the billing is, but that is absolutely not even remotely close to what AI is. AI as a UI does start to make more sense, because what's happening here is that we're starting to have a shift in terms of how people interact then with the business system. It's not like people like business systems. Just really candidly, I've built a career out of this, but I am not excited to go into a business system and update records. Maybe some of you are, which is fantastic, but at the same point, most people want the path of least resistance to get their job done. But what we have to do typically as leaders inside of our organizations is we have to manage that in some way, shape, or form for consistency, repeatability, scaling, whatever it may be, to basically conform then to the business value that we're trying to tackle. Now, what's interesting about AI as the new UI that we're going to see in just a second as well within Business Central is that it's really transforming how we interact with Business Central or how we interact with technology in general. We go from a tool that we log into to a prompt that we can ask a question around to be basically iterate and become more creative. We look for not just data input anymore, because maybe there's a lot of data that's inside of an email that classically somebody would type, but we're looking at the output of that data to generate the narratives and the understanding of what's happening inside of our business environment. We're not just providing commands to a computer to do them. What we're doing is we're providing directional capabilities to an agent that then acts more like a team member than it acts like a machine. And this is a really different concept as we kind of dig into this, is that AI agents and AI in general is typically directionally accurate, but statistically imprecise. And it's a really interesting concept when you start thinking about what's the difference between AI and machine learning, which is way too deep here. But the core here is the fact that when we enable an AI process, we still want that human in the loop, because once again, we just don't want it firing off contracts that we haven't approved. And then finally, we don't need to use specialized language. We can use natural language to really drive what we want that result to be. So this is a really different concept compared to where we have been in the past. And in the business system space, if we look at what's happened in other industries like audio or graphic artists, it is very disruptive, but it's not always perfect either. And that's where we really want to focus around what is the perfection that we can really pursue. So with AI as the UI, obviously we've got the big shift in the AI landscape where now we've got agents that we can deploy that allow us basically to work from where we want to. So some of the concepts that we're starting to see more and that Business Central adopts as well is that I can access Business Central from within Teams, for example, or I can take the information from Business Central and send it to an agent and then have it summarize that information for me daily. So this interaction, once again, when we look at what people do for work, it's not like they're just logging into Business Central. Like, once again, this isn't a one ring rules them all. Instead, what it is that there's different components that team members use to get to the business process result that the organization needs. Let's take just a quick example of a payroll journal. Whether if you're more modern, you're using ADP, you still have to export or have, for example, that information come back into Business Central, because on the income statement, you need to basically then report probably by department what that payroll expense is going to be. Well, an agent needs to know how to understand what is an Excel file. What am I downloading? What am I uploading then into Business Central to create journal entries? So once again, it's not just a business process of looking at it through the lens of Business Central. It's also looking at it through the lens of these different stops that you have to go through in order to accomplish that goal. And the key thing here is that you're working with Teams, SharePoint, Outlook, Excel, and all these different applications to really enhance that productivity and scalability inside of your environment. All right, with that, let's go through what are the new concepts that are being introduced here. Because once again, when we look at an ERP application like Business Central, there's a lot of heritage there. More specifically, that product started way back in the day. It was even bought by IBM way back in the day in the 80s. And I say way back in the day, I'm a little bit aging myself now because I was around for the 80s. But the net result of that is that classical background of the tables, the structures, the data, everything is really critical and important. But when we can start work by just sending an email to an agent to say, create a customer, that changes how we interact then with that business system. Before, we attempted to do this by maybe making an Outlook snap-in, right? Many of you have seen that in the past. And some of you may even use that with GP, for example. But truly, where people work the best has typically been with direct communication with other humans, right? Now, what happens when I create an AI agent and I make that agent named Sally. And Sally is going to be the person where I can send basically a request to say, send me the aged accounts payable for this vendor because I'm a purchasing manager and I want to evaluate basically what their open balances are. You could automate that. We can do that right now inside of Business Central, where you can set up an agent, you can have it monitor an inbox, and you can have the team members send that information to that agent that acts like a person, and it sends then the attachment of that information. So we are starting to get more and more where we can then interact, obviously, with these agents to gather the information. And this is a really interesting perspective because it's not about the replacement of the end user, it's about the acceleration of grabbing the information and getting the information and acting more like an assistant than doing the work. And this is a really interesting concept because, once again, there are a lot of people that say AI can do massive amounts of data very successfully. It can, but it's not as accurate as defining a process and then writing code behind it. So once again, we have to use the tool where we are impactful with the tool, not just because it looks cool or because it sounds like a cool technology. The net result of it is that when we start to shift our minds around this, we start to conform to now why Business Central is making these changes and what we're trying to pursue, which is minimizing the buttons, the clicking, and just making it where we can interact, for example, with plain text and voice interactions to really get that job done. So let's get to it. How is AI impacting work? We know about this technology called Microsoft Copilot. Copilot is the foundational service that Microsoft created that allows us to snap in all of our different applications, whether they're Microsoft first party like Business Central, Finance and Operations, Sales, Word, PowerPoint, wherever it may be. But it also allows you to create custom based agents for your organization. And if I had to stress for any of you, probably the best bang for your buck if you really want to get into AI, you're going to want somebody that understands AI as a concept in your organization to really accelerate that adoption and understanding inside of the organization. But for our technology, we start with Copilot. The cool thing about Copilot is that it's model agnostic. And this is a really important distinction. So you've heard all the competing models. You'll hear Anthropic and Claude, or Google with Gemini, or Meta, for example, with Llama. These are all models that run the AI services in the background. But the really cool thing about Copilot is that you can use different models that are more specific to the task that you're trying to accomplish. Once again, if you're a hammer, everything looks like a nail, but if everything isn't a nail, you need different tools to address those particular needs. Now, the cool concept with Copilot that goes beyond that is that it allows us to then interact with it for our everyday AI companion to tackle a lot of those particular challenges. But we can also then use it with M365, with Word, PowerPoint, and all the different applications. And on top of that, we can use it with Business Central. So when we think about our ERP platform, not only does Copilot now have the ability, for example, to interact and integrate with Business Central, but it also then allows for us to use all of those other capabilities that have been built on the platform to address the security concerns, for example, that Tyler and Nikki brought up, to basically ensure then that you have the security, you have the full enterprise tenant stack as well to tackle it, and you can monitor the consumption and introduce this where you see the value. And this is the important thing to say because I look at this really realistically, being in the market for about 25 years now. The value isn't for me to tell you that AI is amazing. The value is that it actually impacts the business. It actually drives it forward. And the reason I say that is because being in the industry for 25 years, I've seen my fair share of shiny toys that we would sell and that customers would buy because it looks cool. This isn't about looking cool. This is actually impactful capabilities that accelerate then your adoption, your automation, and increase efficiency. But you got to know how to use the tool to be able to really accomplish those particular goals. So with that, let's take a look at Business Central and some of the AI capabilities that Marcus wasn't able to show. So I shouldn't say wasn't able to show. He was graceful enough to let me show them. So we'll say it like that. So inside of here, as you can see, I am inside of Business Central. And basically, I've got my role center. We've talked a little bit about that if you saw it before. And the role center is really designed around the end user experience. In this example, for example, I'm a sales order processor, which means I'm going to have different sales orders, different Shopify activities, different business insights that are inside of here that I'm typically going to be interacting with. Now, Copilot is everywhere on every single Microsoft application, right? For good or bad, right? Once again, a lot of people didn't understand the value of it. So when you push a new feature, it's kind of like Excel. How many additional features do I need to have inside of Excel? But once you start to use a feature, you start to understand the capabilities and how you can use that tool to address the needs. And let's talk about some of those that are inside of Business Central really natively here. So the first is what we call the sidecar experience, where what we can do is we can basically go through and then show a sidecar that then allows me to interact basically with Copilot. And as you can see here, it presents me with some basic information to start where I can look up information or explain and guide me. An example would be how do I do a journal import, or how do I do a gen journal, or how do I create an invoice? We've got a lot of that documentation on the learn.microsoft.com. And what's really cool about it is because Microsoft has maintained that, Copilot can access that to answer then standard business process questions. So an example would be, how do I release a sales order? I know this is really basic to start, but we're going to start basic and incrementally get more advanced. But as you can see here, it's able to go and grab that information and then document it. The cool thing about this is that in other scenarios, we can take, for example, different types of Word documents that you've generated and incorporate them into Copilot so that the very specific instructions that you have for maybe creating an order that might be slightly different than the standard way can be reflected inside of Copilot to be able to answer questions for you. So this is another example of using then Copilot to go beyond just getting information that's been trained on, but also using information that's very pertinent to your process and inside of your organization. Now that's an easy one, right? How do I release a sales order? Let's go a little bit more complex. Let's say, what were the last invoices that were posted on my system, right? So now what we're doing is we're asking questions not off of pre-trained data. We're asking questions off of data that is inside of Business Central. For some of you, this is going to also feel basic, and this is my retort to that. Not everyone knows that the page to go to inside of Business Central is the posted sales invoices as opposed to the sales invoices when they're navigating an application for the first time. Hopefully, you've got great training in place, right? But I bet you in some situations, the training is here's how you access Business Central, right? And then here's some of the process documentation. The cool thing about this is that you can expedite that training and that assistive technology by using the sidecar to basically then bring that information front and center to then, for example, even navigate to records inside of here. So for example, the last posted invoices in my system are a datum, Contoso, and another a datum. What I can do is I can go to the posted sales invoice page and boom, it brings it up for me then to interact with to see additional attributes then related to this posted sales invoice. Once again, it just makes it faster to get to the information, reduces clicks, allows you to really know where to navigate to, and then very rapidly you can get to that information. Now, beyond that, it's great. We're able to go through and do that type of lookup. I want to use more. Once again, I don't know all these cool features that are inside of here, but you know what? I was trained that I'm able to go to my Copilot here and there's this analyze list. And you know what? My manager came up and they said, by month, I want to know exactly what the profitability or revenue, not profitability, we'll do revenue to start. What's the revenue by customer by month? Oh gosh, I got to go to Excel. I got to export it. I don't know how to do that. Well, analyze list. Can you create a view that shows by month and by customer the total amount for each customer, right? Something like that. So what we're doing is we're using, once again, natural language to influence Business Central to basically then pivot short and show different types of information based off of really what the results are in plain English, right? So what we see here is it actually goes through and look at that. I've got my January, February, March, April, May, June, July. If I expand that out, I can see a datum. Looks like it was pretty good, but School of Fine Art was a little bit bigger. As I expand that out, I can see then additional details of each individual invoice, and I could keep that view as an example and then save that. And even then, what's that amount? Once again, the cool part of this is that we've got drill down capabilities, right? So I can just dynamically create a report off of all these different views that I have inside of here and then save that to always see this monthly customer amount. And what I could do is I could flip this, right? I could say, hey, Copilot, don't do it in the rows for the months. Instead, move it into, for example, the columns. So this is once again, a really basic concept inside of here. But as you can see from a productivity perspective, it's a lot faster than to get an answer inside of here. And the cool thing about this is it just doesn't stop there. I feel like a salesman in some ways when it doesn't stop there. Other things that are really impactful, when we talk about the reduction of clicks, for example, if I, for example, click on my customers inside of here and I then open up a datum corporation, what we have are these concepts of called summaries that are really good for AI agents. And it's one of the first features that was introduced that has now been expanded upon inside of Business Central as well. So one of the cool things about generative AI is it's generative, meaning you give it context of what the question is, and then from that context, it generates that narrative. So an example of this would be if I take a customer record and I send the information of that customer record to an agent and I say, pretend you're a sales order processor, identify, for example, the current balance, the overdue amounts, and the overdue order value, and come back in a bulleted format for me. That's the programming that went into the prompt that created this to generate basically this summary that's over here. And you're going to see that in a lot of different areas inside of Business Central, whether it's at a sales order, a customer, a vendor. These summaries are really integral to really understanding, for example, where you're at. And an example here with the datum, like outstanding wise, I've got a profit loss of $471. My demo data, obviously, I've got more cost in the products that I'm selling to a data than revenue I'm making. So once again, you can use these summaries to very quickly understand where a customer is in their journey with you. And the really cool thing about it is that it integrates as well even further than with the sidecar experience, where if I want to drill down into more information around this, what I can do is I can open up Copilot here, click on the show more, and then from there, it's going to give me all the details regarding, for example, the original profit percentage, the average collection periods for this as well, because we have all that data inside of here. The cool thing about this is that we can expand off of this. So once again, I know customization for some people is not a good thing, but you can expand off of this to really then drive additional capabilities. Now, let's talk about where we start seeing even more automation, and that really is with the introduction of agents. So Copilot, we're going to have all these cool features that we're going to have that really make it so that it's easier to navigate information, to find it, to pivot off of it, for example, to summarize it. Scott, you know what? I need to have it where my sales orders, when they come in, I can provide quotes to my customers. And I want those quotes then to be monitored in an inbox that our customers can inquire against. Because you know what? I want to free up the sales team's time to focus on opportunities where they're going to be a higher dollar, for example, than basically answering questions about pricing and quotes and orders. That's where we introduce agents. So as an example here, we have what's called the sales order agent that is a standard agent that comes with Business Central. We also have another agent, which is the purchasing or payables agent inside of here as well. As you can see, inside of our sales order agent, if I click on it to expand it, we've got emails that our team has actually been making to interact with it, where basically a message comes from Marcus. In this example, I would like to place an order for an Athens desk. And what we see here is that the agent picked up that email, identified the item, created the quote, requested a review from the salesperson member, took the PDF, responded back to Marcus, responded back as well, saying, I would like to proceed. And what we can see here is that there was an assist that happened where basically then Marcus converted, or the salesperson converted that sales quote then into an order, all automated as it went through that process by an agent. It did the transactions inside of Business Central to drive that, where basically the end result, if I click on this just to show it, it doesn't look like it's in here, but that quote was converted to an order, and we have that content now inside of here to interact with. So once again, this is an example of taking a business process from end to end and then bringing it into basically Business Central. And it goes further than that. Another example is a payables agent. We can monitor payables to then generate invoices inside of Business Central. And even in the newest version that's going to be released in our next wave release, we're going to start seeing three-way matching and all those details. Mr. Marcus, I appreciate it. He shipped the order. Fantastic. That's why the order is not there anymore. And I could go to the history of orders to see that. So net result, though, is that these agents are going to be very impactful inside of your business. They can be extended to match the needs that you have inside of your organization. And they really then allow, obviously, for that scaling of resources depending upon the need. And once again, the cool thing about this is that you can create your own, and we're going to show that in just a second here as well. All right, let's keep moving here because I've got a couple more things I want to bring up. So AI obviously impacting work. Outlook, Exchange, we've got inboxes where we've got information that's storing there. We've got Teams, for example, where we've got team interaction that we may need inside of Business Central. We've got Dynamics, for example, where we've got purchasing, financial reconciliation, sales order processing. These are all examples of real scenarios that are inside of the business system space. And we even have more in terms of the different types of tasks that we're automating, where we can use PowerPoint to generate slides now. We can use Word to add new sections inside of it. We can use CoWork, for example, to clean up our inbox and calendar. And I bet you for all of you, it's great, Scott. That's funny. This isn't Back to the Future, but great, Scott. How do I keep up with all this? I need to now watch Business Central and all these other areas to really make sure that we're managing this. How do we do that? We use these tools inside of the Microsoft ecosystem to really keep up with that. Aaron, great call out. Really appreciate that image. That's fantastic. So what's interesting here is that when we look at Business Central, introducing consumption means that you need to keep track of it. So what do we do to keep track of it and to govern it inside of Business Central? We use the Power Platform Admin Center to basically ensure that the agents that we're deploying and that the consumption that we're doing is basically reflected, so we can make sure that we keep an eye on this. Because once again, we don't want to put something in place just because it's cool. We want to do something because it frees up time that we could take and look at our salary and then say, this is how much time we're saving, to then see the cost comparison of consumption to basically say, is this saving us money? So we use the Power Platform Admin Center to do that. We use, for example, the Copilot dashboard inside of your Microsoft 365 environment to basically then show even Business Central impact for consumption. And then finally, we have the ability to use Viva Insights as well to go even further. And what I want to do just really quickly, because we don't have much time and I want to make sure I save a little bit of time for a custom agent, I wanted to highlight the fact that when I look at the Power Platform Admin Center, for example, which is where we're hooking all this up, we can see what those particular trends are and the usage that's related to it, as well as then all the different types of Dynamics 365 application, the health, the different types of recommendations that are there. So once again, what's really great about this is that it's not just an individual feature inside of Business Central. It's something that goes deeper into the Microsoft ecosystem where you can then use those tools to combat the cyber threats, for example, or to understand the billing. And you don't have to have 5 different ways to do it. Instead, you can use one to basically get to that information, as well as the different agents, for example, that might be deployed inside of your organization by then using the admin experiences inside of the M365 environment. So this is really cool. This is an example right here, even of our team member, Anna, that actually created an agent that would actually then take Shopify or web or e-commerce based orders and then create them inside of Business Central as well as a proof of concept. So once again, these are capabilities that we have inside of our environment that really drive that adoption and that AI capability as well. All right, let's go through and do one last thing. What about full automation? Because I know when you look at what you're seeing here, for example, to start, it's like, great. Once again, Scott, this isn't going to be exactly what I need. I need to create something for some given scenario, but I need Business Central to be a part of that. That's the great thing about a modern AI centric business system. And I say this with as much passion as possible because if a business system doesn't support this is a problem because it needs to be done in order to support agents in the future, which is absolutely the direction we're going. So, what about full automation? So, what happens when AI can interact with your applications? And what do I mean by that? They click on the buttons. They interact, for example, with the user experience or interface that a typical user interacts with. And what we do to accomplish that with the Microsoft technologies is this concept called MCP. It's called Model Context Protocol. It is a interesting 3-letter acronym that basically means that an AI agent can connect to an application and understand how to interact with that application. It's a training manual for an agent. Look at it like that. Now, with that, though, we have the ability for agents to actually click on buttons and to take actions. And so, what I want to do is, I want to show you a scenario that we tackled that does exactly this and then updates the business system. And the cool thing about this is it doesn't matter whether or not it's in Dynamics 365 Sales, Business Central, Finance and Operations. As long as the application supports MCP, it supports the ability for an agent to then directly interact with it. And let's go ahead and take a quick look at that. So inside of one of my environments, I have a technology that I'm using called Copilot Studio. This is where we typically extend a lot of the different types of agents that Microsoft makes, the first party agents. Now in Business Central, we've got some that are in Business Central because it's an all-in-one solution, but we do have the ability to also then use Copilot Studio to create different types of agents inside of your organization to address those needs. Now, in this agent, this is what I call a commodity contract agent. And what I told this agent is I gave it some instructions that say, you know what? Your goal is basically to take the information that I'm going to give to you and then to go enter or update different contracts inside of Business Central, Finance and Operations, wherever it may be. So that way I can have an end user free up their time from doing the swivel chair effect. Now, some of you would create a custom integration with this, right? You'd write code to do this, or you'd use a middleware type application to do it. If the person's already doing it, it's probably not super high volume, which means it's a perfect repeatable task then for an agent. And if we could scale that to go across multiples, we could do that as well. So in this example, we have this agent that also has worker agents that are related to it. We call them child agents. One of them is to generate emails, and one of them is to basically do the transactions inside of the business system. Inside of the business system, if I look at the instructions I told that agent, I said, hey, you're going to be entering in data here. Don't skip records. Don't create new rows. Don't allow for rounding tolerances to occur. Follow these steps basically to go through and enter in that transaction. I didn't write a single line of code. I didn't make code to say go do X, Y, or Z. Instead, I used natural language where I defined the high level steps, the reasoning, the final completion, what cleanup needs to occur, what error reporting needs to be there. And as you can see here, I defined all these rules for the agent just using natural language. When that agent runs, what I'll do is I'll just give an example. We're going to go ahead and toggle the debug mode inside of here. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to go into my activity and we're going to open up a prior activity that I did, because what I want to do is I want to show you what it can do. So as an example, whenever a contract in this other system is checkmarked as ready, that would in the past send an email to the person that would then do the swivel chair effect to do the update. Instead, what we did is we said, we'll send that email basically to the agent. And here is the email that came to the agent. And so what we did then from there is basically we had the agent then go through and do all the magical stuff that it does to grab that data. And we did a mixture here. We used some classical tools like Power Automate to go grab information because the system we were grabbing it from didn't have MCP capabilities, but it had the ability for us to go ahead and grab that data. And what you're seeing in the background here is the agent actually going through and thinking through what it needs to do. And now what it's doing is it's actually logging into Dynamics 365 and it's starting to do all these different types of updates. And basically, at the end of this process, if I look at the prior one that I ran in the interest of time, and we look at the automated scenario here, what we can see is it did the adjustment, it did the update related to it, and basically processed all those records. And then at the end, it sent me a wonderful success email that said, Scott, we actually went ahead and applied that and actually updated it. And you know what's really cool about this success email when you look at it? It looks pretty impactful, right? It gives me all the necessary information I need to understand what happened when it went through the processing. You want to see what I told it to send as part of that? It's just mind blowing when you think about it. All I told it to do for the email processing, I didn't give it a format. I just said, make sure that the formatting is impactful. I didn't do anything else to define that format. And what I could do is I could define that more in detail as well to make it even better as it goes through that processing. So this is a perfect example then of where we're using AI to basically automate these different processes so that it can cycle through and do those updates by using then just natural language to attack or to tackle those particular issues inside of an organization. All right, we're getting to the end here. I've got a couple minutes. I guess the key takeaways for all of you today. First off, agents are transforming how work is done. Using Business Central really safeguards your perspective and your investment because it's something that we see more and more often that is working better. It's not like we're at the initial phase like 3 years ago. Instead, now we are getting better results. We had lots of learning. We've got many different customers at different stages of this journey as well, and that the tooling has really supported advanced capabilities and some of the new ones that are coming out. If you haven't heard of Mythos, for example, where Anthropic won't release it to the general public, there are some models that are becoming even more capable in terms of the tasks that they're performing. So as these technologies grow, and as we move from GPT-4 to 5 to 6 to whatever it is, we're going to see obviously more disruption and more capabilities that are added. But the key thing here is that you should be looking at incorporating change management AI now in your process to at least start dabbling with it to know what that impact is going to be as you go through that process.